Imagine standing in a dimly lit chapel in Naples, Italy. The air smells of old stone and candle wax. And then you see it, a figure lying on a stone slab draped in a thin cloth. But something is deeply wrong with what you're looking at. The cloth is made of marble, cold, hard white marble, yet somehow, impossibly, you can see the outline of eyelids through it, the curve of lips, the hollow of a cheekbone, the grief etched into a face you cannot fully see. And somehow that makes it more devastating than if you could. You reach out, almost involuntarily, because every nerve in your body is telling you that if you just lifted that veil, you would find skin. You would find a man. You wouldn't, of course. What you would find is stone. And that impossibility, that gap between what your eyes insist is true and what your hands would confirm, is the mystery that has haunted the veiled Christ for over 250 years. If this kind of story speaks to you, hit that like button and subscribe to Echoes of Time so you never miss a mystery like this one. Now, let's go back to Naples. The sculpture sits in the Cappella San Severo in Naples, a private chapel built by the noble di Sangro family. It was completed in 1753 by an Italian sculptor named Giuseppe Sanmartino, and it depicts the body of Jesus Christ lying in repose after the crucifixion, covered by a thin burial shroud. In theory, that sounds straightforward. In practice, it is one of the most technically bewildering achievements in the entire history of art. Scholars, artists, and scientists have studied it for centuries, and to this day, no one has fully explained how it was made. Not completely, not satisfyingly. To understand why the sculpture is so extraordinary, you need to understand something about marble. Marble is one of the most unforgiving materials a human hand can work with. It does not bend, it does not flow. Every chip you take from it is permanent, and a single miscalculation, one slip of the chisel, can destroy weeks of work. Great sculptors learn to think of marble not as something they shape, but as something they reveal. Michelangelo famously said that the sculpture already existed inside the block. He merely removed everything that wasn't it. But Sanmartino did something that even Michelangelo never attempted. He didn't just reveal a figure, he revealed a figure hidden beneath another surface. He carved the veil and the body beneath it as a single, continuous piece of stone. There are no seams, no joins, no trick of assembly. The shroud and the Christ are one. Run your eyes across the surface of the veil, and you will see it gathering in folds near the shoulders, pulling tight across the bridge of the nose, draping loosely over the shins. You can see the texture of woven fabric, the tiny ridges and valleys of thread crossing thread, rendered in stone with a precision that defies logic. Art historians have measured the thickness of the veil in certain areas at just a few millimeters, meaning Sanmartino carved marble thinner than some ceramic tiles without it cracking, without it collapsing, across an area spanning the full length of a human body. The margin for error was, essentially, zero. And yet, here is where the story deepens, because Sanmartino may not have been working alone. The man who commissioned the sculpture was Raimondo di Sangro, the seventh prince of San Severo, and he was not merely a nobleman with good taste. He was a polymath, an inventor, an alchemist, and by many accounts, a man obsessed with secrets. In his lifetime, he claimed to have invented a waterproof fabric, a new method of color printing, and a peculiar carriage that ran without horses. He corresponded with some of the greatest minds of the 18th century Enlightenment. He was also, by many accounts, deeply involved with Freemasonry, and the chapel he built reflects a worldview that blends Catholic devotion with occult symbolism in ways that still provoke debate. The legend that surrounds the veiled Christ, the one that refuses to die no matter how many times experts dismiss it, is this: that the veil was not carved from stone at all. That Raimondo di Sangro used a secret alchemical process to petrify an actual fabric veil, turning real cloth into marble through a chemical transformation known only to him. The story first appeared in writing not long after the sculpture's completion, and it spread with remarkable speed, perhaps, because it felt more believable than the alternative, that a human hand had simply carved it that way. Modern analysis has, to a large degree, refuted the petrification theory. X-rays and chemical studies of the marble confirm that it is consistent with stone that was carved, not transformed. But, and this is the detail that keeps the legend alive, the analysis has never been fully conclusive. The veil's surface has properties that some researchers describe as subtly unusual, a crystalline quality in certain regions that doesn't quite match the body beneath it. No one has claimed to prove petrification, but no one has entirely closed the door either. And in the absence of certainty, myth flourishes. What we do know about Raimondo di Sangro is strange enough without alchemy. In the basement of the Cappella San Severo, there are two anatomical machines, human skeletons with their arterial systems fully intact, every vein and capillary preserved in extraordinary detail. For centuries, no one knew how they were made or what they were made of. Modern tests eventually revealed an artificial material, likely injected after death. But the technique was so far ahead of its time that it prompted serious scholarly debate about what di Sangro actually knew about human physiology. The The man was, at minimum, a genius operating at the extreme edge of 18th century science. At maximum, he was something else entirely. But return for a moment to the sculpture itself, because the deeper you look, the more emotionally complex it becomes. The veiled Christ is not simply a technical marvel, it is a meditation on grief. The figure of Christ is not idealized or triumphant in the way of so much religious art. He is exhausted. His feet are slightly crossed, still bearing the memory of the nails. His hands lie open at his sides, palms up, in a gesture that reads less like divine surrender and more like the simple emptiness of a man who has nothing left to give. The veil over his face covers everything except the faintest impression of his expression, and in doing so, it forces the viewer to complete the image in their own mind. You supply the grief. You supply the pain. The sculpture doesn't show you the face of suffering, it makes you feel it. This, perhaps, is the deepest mystery of the veiled Christ. Not the chemistry of its surface or the politics of its patron, but the question of how a single artist, working in a single year, produced an object that continues to make grown adults weep in a chapel in southern Italy more than 2.5 centuries later. Giuseppe Sanmartino made only a handful of other works, none of them particularly famous. He did not go on to reshape the art world. He carved the veiled Christ, and then, in a sense, history moved on, leaving this one impossible object behind, marooned in time, defying everyone who tries to explain it. Antonio Canova, one of the greatest sculptors who ever lived, visited the Cappella San Severo in 1787, 30 years after Sanmartino completed the work. Canova was not a man easily impressed. He had made his reputation by pushing marble to its limits, by carving textures and surfaces that no one thought possible. He stood before the veiled Christ for a long time. Then he reportedly said that he would give 10 years of his life to have made it himself. 10 years. From a man who spent his entire life making beautiful things. That, in the end, may be the only measurement that matters. Not the chemical composition of the marble, not the politics of the Di Sangro family, not the alchemical rumors or the Masonic symbolism hidden in the chapel's walls. Just this. One of the greatest artists who ever lived stood in front of this sculpture and felt humbled. He felt something that the rest of us feel too. The pull toward the veil, that desire to lift it, to see the face beneath, to understand. And the sculpture's genius is that it knows you will never do it. That the mystery, the distance, the thin membrane of marble between you and the truth is precisely the point. Some things are meant to be approached but never fully reached. The veiled Christ has been waiting for 270 years. It is still waiting now.